Hello and welcome to our next episode of Leading at a Local Level. I'm Tim and my good friend John is with me.
Good to see you, Tim. Are we going to have any more of these hand movements in this episode?
Oh, well, we need some circular hand movements. I need to find a new hand movement for today, for today's discussion. Well, we've been doing a week of mental health, which may be negatively affecting your mental health if you've listened to all of these. Hopefully it's not. But we've talked, haven't we, about, what have we talked about, John? Remind us.
Yeah, so we talked about sort of defining mental health, what is mental health, the theology of mental health, the role of the enemy, and then lastly, how we can respond in churches.
Right. So today we're going to address really probably the most controversial of subjects. What happens when actually there are some people that are sitting there thinking, I think that, I get that there are some people that struggle with mental health, but really a lot of it is people just need to get themselves together and pull their socks up. And so, there's a phrase in the newspapers, it's snowflaking. What's a snowflake, John? I've never quite understood. Is it melt easily? Is it under pressure?
The fragile, it's indicating a fragility under pressure, I suppose, which,
Can I say, it's really interesting, right? Because you talk about culture, right? We've got a few old people in our church. We've got a lady that's 93 or something that. And another lady's in her mid-80s and a couple of others. Their attitude towards COVID was like, bothered. Like they were just like, we'll get the vaccine, whatever. But, to be honest, it's just a fuss, this thing. And their attitude is like, we've suffered through it. And honestly, they without meaning to be like, during the war, but my friend Jim Bailey used to say, during the war. But almost their attitude is like, we've suffered through so much worse than this. Like we're not bothered kind of thing. We can suck it up and go with it. And I do just wonder if we do have a bit of a problem in our culture of almost mental weakness. Let's put it like that. Like we're just mentally not robust. I mean, I don't know if you'd agree with me. I think
I think there's some things we can definitely affirm. There's been a bit of a swing, hasn't there, away from sort of just get on with it, just kind of stiff upper lip kind of thing. And there's been we're not going to do that in this episode, but there are things you can really affirm about that, and so that's a good thing that we're recognizing, that we're understanding people better. But as with anything, the swing can go in the other direction, and I would agree with you that in some cases that swing has gone way too far in the other direction, where we're actually more fragile than ever. And I think that can be a problem. And I think, as you say, once everything becomes an issue of mental health, the challenge there, of course, is picking out, what is mental health? If it's saying, actually, this is a mental health problem, and that's something that's almost can be used as a barrier, as saying, actually, don't ask me any more questions about this, don't challenge me, I'm under my psychiatrist, I'm going to be medicated for that. We can get into the realms of being, over-medicalizing what is more of a holistic sort of life problem that actually should be kind of addressed in community with people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I'm seeing it with different people that you lead, and actually often the people that are the most reliable and the ones that are able to really carry through with things and do things that are difficult are the older generations, and the younger generations seem to find it very easy to be flaky. To use that expression, almost when the pressure turns up, they can't, when you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. Well, there's no one in the kitchen, and so nothing's getting cooked often. And that's not to say that younger you and I have talked a lot about generations and the difference between generations, and there are many creative things and the way that young people think at the moment, I think is really helpful.
Absolutely.
In this particular area around being resilient and robust, that's clearly an issue. So how as the leaders then? So let's identify John, why. Maybe it's helpful to think about what it is that is causing these problems. What are the kind of cultural themes that are kind of creating this mental fragility that is unhelpful? We know, that is not medical and is just, an issue. So I know you want to talk about something called safetyism, don't you?
Yeah, well, let's talk about safetyism. I think we've got three. So let's start with safetyism. And this was coined in a book called The Coddling of the American Mind by I've gone completely blank as to one of my heroes who wrote that book.
Greg someone.
Greg Lukianov, and it'll come back to me in just a moment. But they describe this epidemic in society of safetyism, this cult of safety. And the idea about safetyism is the idea that if you remove all threats, you're basically removing everything that might make you feel physically endangered, but actually be emotionally endangered.
Yeah.
And so actually it's the result is that, and they say, is that you can get people who are more fragile, more anxious, more prone to seeing themselves as victims. And what happens is that safety becomes a value. Every culture has values that they hold up one above the other. And safety has been pushed right to the top, I believe, of the pile. So it basically says, safety trumps every other value, no matter how trivial or even unlikely the danger might be. We've got to be safe. And I sometimes, I see the signs around COVID, and I do get it. And I'm not by no means a COVID denier. I completely believe that it's real and it infects people and has done a huge harm. But it's amazing how the stay safe sign has been the cultural mantra. Stay safe, be safe. Wear your mask to keep others safe. And it's like, well, how safe can we be? And that's one of the big debates, isn't it? And I think it's
It's like the health and safety. People say health and safety culture gone mad, don't they? That's kind of their classic. Like we can't do anything now. I mean, we used to run. You and I went to a youth camp, then a boys' camp, and we used to do rifle shooting, which was shooting little tiny pellets. But the insurance company wouldn't let us do it after a while because it was deemed to be not safe. It was perfectly safe. No one in all of the years that they've been doing it, not once had anyone even got slightly injured. It's just, but we must. We must keep people safe. And I think about my kids. Same thing with your kids, John. I can see how that's impacted me with my children, my parenting.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. The desire to buffer from anything that might make us emotionally feel unsafe. And that stems from a well-being culture, that says actually our biggest priority in life is our well-being. And that, so that plays out in so many ways, doesn't it? Avoid toxic people, buffer yourself, anything that might lower your self-esteem. You've got to be positive. So the well-being culture, when it's then threatened, when your well-being is then threatened, we get this safetyism, and actually we have to be safe. That actually emotional danger is the same as physical danger. And that's huge. And particularly for our younger generations, I think we see that. So I think that's one thing that we see that drives the mental health, I guess, labeling, I suppose, and putting everything in the mental health basket, is saying, I've been injured by that and it's impacting my mental health.
Yeah, I think it's definitely. I mean, I definitely see it when you talk about it. I see it in my own parenting. Like if I think about what my parents were like. I mean, you and I, obviously, we talk about this on a regular basis on this podcast. Our long-standing friendship. But I remember going up to the woods with you. On our own. Age 8 or 9, or maybe 9 or 10, going up in the woods with penknives. To build bases in Oxley's Woods. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And we were allowed to go off on our own. I mean, nowadays, the thought of sending my 8-year-old or 9-year-old or 10-year-old up to the woods with a knife to build things, I think I would struggle with that. I would find it hard.
And statistically, it's safer. So this is Moynihan's law, which says, the better things get, the worse things they may seem. And actually, we think that it's worse and there's more kind of evil people out on the streets. Actually, it's safer than ever. Is safer than ever to send our kids up the road. I think that's influenced by our kind of 24/7 media culture. So we're bombarded by news, from places, and that overwhelm us that we become numb to. We can't control them, and before this 24/7 kind of news cycle, before Twitter and everything, we weren't so aware of all those things. We're not built as humans to be aware and to take on so much load, if you like. And so emotionally, we have this exaggerated sense of unsafety, I suppose, of danger.
Don't you think some of this comes down to control? So, like, I suppose as we've got wealthier, as we've got medically more advanced, there's a kind of an illusion that the devil, I think, has sort of spread into our culture that somehow we are in control of our safety. Yeah. And I know that, but in reality, we're not that control of our safety, really. We're not. And we seem to think we have more power than we do, I suppose. And I suppose that.
Yeah, we can control everything. So we can control life and death. So beginning of life, we can control when a baby's born. So we're just used to being in control. The big arguments around end of life, therefore we should be able to control. We're used to being in control. Or when we feel out of control, COVID is a great example of this. We look to external authorities to bring that control for us. We look for external authorities to make us safe. So the government will make us safe. lockdowns will mean that we're safe, and my doctor will make sure that I'm safe. And so that's why there's outrage when there's a failing by a politician or by a doctor, because your safety, your health, that bed reserved for you in the ITU in case you get COVID really badly, that is the number one priority in our society. Safety.
So how does that affect someone in a mental health capacity? How has that reaped damage in our kind of people that we're leading?
Yeah, and I think evidence shows that when you try and go for safety, that actually we're not as safe as we imagine. So if you take the lockdown, for example, what we see coming out of lockdowns is that all these viruses that weren't able to circulate before, the immunity is lower. I deal with kids, so we're seeing in a summertime it's like winter, because all these kids are now being exposed to these viruses, and they're perhaps a little bit worse. Fortunately, they're not too sick, but we know that you're likely to get more sick if you haven't been exposed to something, if you're exposed to it later. So actually, it's an illusion, because we become less able to handle the threats. And I think that's a physical example, but similarly mentally, evidence shows us that you're actually making people more fragile. So our younger generation are more fragile, are more prone to depression and anxiety, massively so. And some of that's real depression and real anxiety, but it's just that the threshold has been lowered. So if you like, that's triggered those feelings of hopelessness. I spoke about them last time. They're horrible, but those feelings of hopelessness and despair are triggered much earlier, because actually you haven't got the emotional resources to deal with it. Is that what you see?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I see that in young people that just feel like they're told all the time that things need to be wonderful and things need to be, they need to be safe, and it's like they don't learn. Like, I've got a boss that's difficult and therefore he's toxic, so I need to leave. It's like, well, we've all had difficult bosses, but you just had to get on with it. And I think now, and you see it, I started to see it a bit when I left my, I work full time for the church now, but, you could use the phrase, someone can use the phrase in a disciplinary hearing, this person was affecting my mental health. And it's actually like, and maybe they were, but I just think there's a weakness there that's come in that we need to, as leaders, we need to challenge gently. And this is the key, isn't it? How do you challenge this? How do you challenge that, John? How do you recognise this person has got an unhealthy obsession with safety? Yeah. And I say obsession, maybe an unhealthy kind of emphasis on safety. Yeah. How do we as a leader challenge someone in our team?
Well, it has to be personally. So if we're getting into keyboard warrior territory where we're challenging each other, it's just a disaster. So it's got to be relational. People got to know we're for them. We're not. So, John,
is it not acceptable for me just to send an email to that person telling them to get over it?
No.
All right. Okay.
Definitely not. Take it back. I'm sure you wouldn't do anything like that. But no, we've got to be relational. So people got to know that we're for them. But we're not just kind of ranting about our political point of view. So depoliticize it, and actually,
so really cool. That's so helpful. Yeah, depoliticize.
Definitely. Because if you're known for taking a really strong, and we've done a bit of posting on social media, but if you're known for really strong views on certain things, that's going to affect the way that you're going to be able to lead people. Just to say that. So we've got to be able to do that. So I think it's that. I think secondly, it's just saying, just being confident enough to know a little bit about some of the research around this. So post-traumatic growth is quite a big area in research. It shows that people become stronger after suffering through a traumatic experience. Right. Okay, so and that's what CBT is based on. So actually being exposed to things actually does help us become less fragile in the future. Right. So be confident about that in the science, if you like. And I think thirdly, biblically, let's point people to what the Bible says about safety and being really harsh about it. I mean, Simon Gilbo, who's a missionary in Burundi, he's got a great phrase where he says, we are safe. In life and in death, we're safe. So actually, as a Christian, it sounds a bit basic, but as a Christian, actually, there's no such thing as real safety. No. But actually, the real safety comes in knowing that we're the Lord's, and knowing that actually, whether we're alive or whether we're dead, he would go down a road filled with armed militias, and he said, well, I'm confident. I'm not going to be completely foolish, but I'm also confident that God will take me at my time. And God won't allow anything to happen to me that isn't in his plan. Yeah. So I think just reminding people of theological truths that actually, what does the Bible say about safety? Let's talk about what safety is. And I think you'll find less there about safety than we might expect. I mean, how about you? I mean, you're from a pastoral perspective.
Yeah, I think one thing that I'm beginning to do more and more in terms of this is talk about, how we become strong. you know, talking about it in a positive context. What's the key to strength in this age? And realizing you know, how do you become strong, and trying to emphasize it not as a negative but as a positive. So I think kind of maybe preaching sermons, you know, and counseling, talk, you know, when, you know, one-to-one kind of coffees and meetups is the Lord, you know, the Lord is, you know, it's in our weakness that we're strong. So we recognize that God, we don't have to come with lots of strength, but we can. Oh, hello, Heidi. Heidi's in the background. Can she hear you? There we are. She just wandered in.
She can't hear you, but she's
looking indeed. Never mind. Good. But yeah, so we have. Yeah, I've lost my train of thought now, John. Look at that. Your wife interrupting our podcast. How dare she interrupt?
I think she's got work stuff to get. So
that's fine. We'll excuse her, you know. But yeah, I think trying to have this whole language around being strong, what it means to be strong, and because I think the culture encourages you to be weak. It almost encourages you to recognise that you're struggling and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, no. We're more than conquerors in Christ Jesus. Since when have you been pathetic and weak? You're not like that. You haven't got to be macho. But I think trying to encourage people to be confident, to know who you are. And I think that's key, really. And I think, you know, we've got to emphasise that.
Well, the status isn't there in victimhood. So I think there's and attention. And I think that's where a lot of things come down to, is people are crying out for attention, for love. Aren't we all? Like, we all are, of course we are. But when you find the affirmation is when you acknowledge, you know, in your vulnerability and your weakness, by being a victim, by having victim status, that's the culture that we're in. And that's profoundly different to the culture that we see in the gospel, where we find our identity and our purpose and our meaning and our security and our safety, if you like, in the gospel, in God himself. And we need to keep going on that, you know, week by week, day by day, drip feed. This is the gospel. And it's good news. It's countercultural, and it's good news because it works. Let me tell you, it is a blind alley the way our culture's going. It doesn't work. Scientifically, it doesn't work, but we know just intuitively it doesn't work. So let's be confident about it.
Absolutely. So safetyism is an issue. I would say another issue, John, is obsession with self.
Yeah,
so I talk a lot. You hear the number. I mean, and it's almost become a good thing now. You notice how the devil is twisted. You know, self-empowerment, self-actualization. You know, self-aware.
Believe in yourself. Believe in yourself.
Yeah,
you can do it. Yeah,
exactly. And I suppose if I'm being brutally honest, and I may be being slightly controversial, but I think that all mental health issues are an over-obsession with self. You know, if you're depressed, you're basically you're obsessed with yourself. And now some of that, as we said, is medical, and some of that's kind of trauma. So it's not necessarily that the person is entirely at fault in that case. But really, that my experience of mental health people, they can't stop thinking about themselves, how they've been wronged, what's happened to them, about their sense of self-worth. And so I think we need to challenge that whole self-obsession, and create cultures in churches. And this is the key. Does your church culture create a self-obsession? Does what you preach on a Sunday promote self? So it's in the hymns you sing. Right? Are you singing songs? This is why I have a problem with a lot of modern songs. They're emphasizing self. Now that's okay in moderation, but if that's a major emphasis of your ministry, you're going to create very mentally weak people. I think if your preaching is all about, you know, you've got to find freedom, Jesus wants to set you free, and all these sort of things, which is great, but it's self-focused, I guess. You know, in your pastoral counselling, in your leadership, if you're trying to always talk about self-empowerment and all this sort of stuff, and I've done some of this stuff, I'm not sure it really helps. I think that for me, I'm suddenly starting to rant, John.
Yes, nice.
But it's like, I think we need a culture which emphasises service, right? Who can you serve? It's not about you. Don't join the church for you. Join the church to serve. And I think we need to emphasise this language. It's tough, but I think in the end it will yield results. The other thing we need to emphasise is the biblical truth that if a grain of wheat is to produce fruit, it needs to fall in the ground and die, right? My dad used to love to preach that message. And I think we've got quite a lot of strong people in River that have really come through with the Lord. And I think we emphasise that truth. My dad particularly emphasised this. If you want to go on with the Lord, you've got to lay down your life. You know, he who desires to save his life will lose it. He's willing to lose it will find it. And I think we've got to, those are such countercultural messages, but they're so important that we need to preach, we need to sing them, we need to counsel them, we need to model them. It's just, to me, we've got to counteract this selfish culture. And on that, end rant.
End of rant. No, I agree with you. And I think the culture of self is so real. I think what we sometimes think as in church leadership is we think, well, but we need to love people. And that means accepting them, and that means not challenging. And I think that's the other thing linked to the culture of self, is that we are so obsessed with it, if you like, that we start to we've taken the society's redefinition of words like freedom, free to do what we want rather than what we're created for, or love. Love is basically just accepting people and condoning anything. Well, again, that's not biblical love. I mean, biblical love is kind of got its nice parts, but it's got its tough parts as well. And that's where we need to go back to what God's word says about the word love. God defines what love is, not our society, not celebrities. It's God who decides what love is. And so actually to love people well when they come with, struggling with mental health problems, is that we actually do need to be full of grace, but full of truth. And we need to be pointing people to this, to the truth that actually this isn't a self-improvement gospel. It's not a self-actualization gospel. Yeah. It's not about the self. As you say, it's about service. It's about self-denial. It's about self-control.
Absolutely.
And these are ridiculed in our society. Why would you want to teach self-control? Why do you want to teach self-denial? That's just so harmful. But actually, again, go back to the science. Like, it's not harmful. It's profoundly healthy. In fact, if you want to find your life, lose your life. Okay. Yes. A famous person said that, didn't he? Yeah, I'm sure that's what Jesus said, right? Yeah, if you want to save yourself, then lose your life. And actually, we know this is true in our experience. We know it's true in all the scientific studies, that actually when we focus on other people, when we actually lay ourselves down for other people, that's where we find true life. It's giving. I mean, there's a great blog from Tim Challies, who both you and I read, a fantastic blog, he's basically saying, stop focusing on yourself and what you can get and how you can develop, and just go out there and give. And as you give, you're going to find real joy. You're going to find real contentment.
Absolutely.
In life.
Oh, amen. I love that message, John, because I think that's so important. And I think this is where it's a challenge to you. If you're leading at a local level in a church, right, our hope is to equip you and create healthy churches, right? Yeah. That's what we want to do. And healthy churches are going to reach the world with the gospel. And I think that so much we need to get back to preaching countercultural messages. I was reading yesterday, right, where and basically Paul says about the gospel being offensive. The gospel is an offense. Right? And we don't want to be offensive for the sake of it. But as you said, the message of self-denial, like, are you calling people out? We need to get tougher as leaders in calling people out, I think, and saying, no, it's not about just what you want or what, it's about denying yourself. It's about serving others. And I just think we need to have church cultures which emphasize these things. And it's not easy. I suppose I could talk a little bit about how we do that in our church. Because we emphasize that in our church.
Yeah, how do you do that?
So one of the things we talk a lot about is often people will come to me and they'll say things like, oh, I don't want to do it because, I don't know, I don't really feel like it, kind of thing. Okay. And I'm like, immediately my challenge is nearly always, but how can you serve someone else through doing that? Yeah. How can you serve someone? And a lot of it is direct challenge, to be honest. And it's trying to emphasize that you need to come and you need to serve other people. It's not about, I don't enjoy home group. Well, maybe you don't enjoy home group that much. How can you see that as an opportunity to serve someone else in that environment? I don't like Zoom church. Well, none of us like Zoom church, but how can you participate in Zoom church to help serve someone else? Yeah. And I think we just try and reinforce that again and again. You have to serve others. And I think it is countercultural, and there are going to be people that leave your churches because of it. But I think in the end, it will prove to be the strength, because I don't know what you think, John, but I think things could get a lot more challenging for the church in the years to come, and our freedoms could get restricted. I'm not saying it will, but I think it's possible. You could see how it'd be possible for the church's freedoms to be restricted, and then it's the tough that are going to make it through and the weak won't. And actually, how are you preparing your church to be strong? Yeah. To be tough, to stand up against it. And it isn't going to be easy. When the church has faced persecution, it is totally about self-denial and service, So, sorry, again, I'm on rant mode today. Sorry.
No, it's good. I'm aware of time. I think you've touched on it already, but I think the third kind of driver, I think, for some of these things is the kind of sort of emotionalism.
Yeah, absolutely.
Another term for that is, and I'll put in the show notes, a very helpful podcast on the affective revolution. So it's an affective with an A, so affects the way we feel. And that is driving a lot of philosophy kind of in our society, which is driving the way that we feel and the way that we respond. And we say, well, actually, I'm driven by how I feel today. Yeah. And that can have real impacts on sort of our mood. We can sort of overly judge, when we're up and when we're down. So we just sometimes need to be aware of that. But when we're responding to feelings all the time, that actually who I feel is who I am, if you like, or I feel therefore I am. That's really where we're at. Away from the Descartes, I think, therefore I am, we've really moved from that kind of cognitive to the kind of the feeling. We just need to be aware of that. And again, there are some positives in that. God's given us feelings. We affirm that feelings are good. They're good, originally good, but they can lead us in all sorts of directions when we're driven by our feelings. And we talked about in the last episode, if we just constantly don't feel like God loves us, then there can be a problem. But actually, for people who are struggling with severe depression, that might be a real reality.
Yeah, exactly.
Of where they're at. And actually, we need to affirm in the lack of feelings. But I mean, just as I was sort of closing to it, is that fair? How do we sort of address the feelings side of things in church?
Again, I think it comes down to the gospel, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. What we're talking about is preaching the gospel. Is that it's not what you feel, it's what's true. Yeah. That matters, and we've lost our way with that now. I think as a society, it's like if I feel it must be truth, but it isn't necessarily that's the case, and that's why we have got such problems. I totally agree with you. So I think it's preaching the gospel. You've got to preach the gospel, preach it in the pulpit, preach it in what you sing, preach it in what you counsel. You've just got to preach truth, and to the point that preach the uncomfortable bits. Preach the difficult bits. Just preach truth. Preach things that are hard to hear, and your church may even find that difficult, but you want to crack culture. I mean, I guess, and I think your church does this a bit, John, but but we try and emphasize the Bible. Any new converts, we say to them, like, we believe the Bible. We do our best to follow the Bible. We do our best to live by the word of God in the Bible. That's our truth point. If you want to know if what we're saying is right, you go to the Bible and see if it's true. And so we're always emphasizing that truth. And we really want to be evangelical in our understanding of God's word. And that's under attack.
It is, because truth is out there. We see truth as out there. It's external to us. It has authority. Whereas actually today in culture, we're told truth is in here. Yeah. I have authority to make my decisions. And so it's radical. We're saying, bend the knee to an external source of reality. Yeah, absolutely. And we need to keep going. And it's tough. And I think, for anyone who is listening or watching us, just want to encourage you just to keep going. Because it's worth it. In the end, it's worth it.
Absolutely, absolutely. But our role as leaders is to challenge. And I think if we must also care. So we've talked in the first 4 episodes about care. Absolutely. But I think there is also a role as the leaders to challenge. Absolutely. To challenge, you need to challenge a safetyism culture. You need to challenge an obsession with self. You need to challenge emotion over truth, and that's going to hurt you as a leader. It's going to cost you. Yeah. But I think in the end, that's what you need to do if you really want to be effective as a leader over time. So, John, we're going to wind it up there. We have done a whole week. People are probably bored. If you've managed to listen to all 5 of these talks and got to this point, well done. We'll send you a special Leading at a Local Level sticker. We're not going to do that. We don't have stickers. But it's well done if you've got that. Hopefully you found it helpful. If you want to write to us, you can get in touch with the details that are going to come on just in a moment. We'd love you to subscribe and like these kind of videos. If they're helpful, share them with other people. If you want us to come in and support you as a church, as a leader, we just want to be a help to equip leaders, don't we, John? We want to help churches be healthy. If we can do that in any way, if we can serve you in any way, then please just do get in touch. But thank you, John. Yeah,
thanks, Tim.
No, it's been good, and we look forward to the next episode, whenever that may be.
Cheers. Bye for now.
Bye.
Yeah.